We're going to make the best chocolate cake today. I get so many compliments with this cake, and I know you will too. In fact, it's one of the only cakes that my son will eat. He eats this chocolate cake and then pound cake. Yeah, I've had to make him several pies for his birthday before. First, let's talk a little bit about the history of chocolate because we need to know where our food is coming from, right? Okay, so chocolate actually comes from the Americas, and it needs a nice warm tropical climate to grow your cocoa beans. And so think of Mexico, Central America, the warm parts of South America. And your Aztecs loved chocolate. So ambrosia was the nectar of the gods for the Greeks. Chocolate is going to be that divine connection for the Aztecs. Now, not everyone was able to drink chocolate. The emperor, or kind of semi-divine, were able to drink it, and then of course it would be used in some religious ceremonies. Chocolate had such a high value that cocoa beans were used as currency in the Aztec Empire. So you might be carrying a few cocoa beans around in your pocket to purchase things, right? I mean, who doesn't want to be paid in chocolate? I'm game for that any day of the week. Okay, the Aztec Empire is a vast empire, right? They conquered lots of neighboring peoples, and they would charge them tribute or taxes. And so one of the things that they would collect would be cocoa beans. The Aztecs would say, hey, I need so many baskets of cocoa beans from your village at the end of the year, and that would be their tribute or their tax. So how did the Aztecs eat chocolate? Because they're actually missing a key ingredient, an ingredient that's probably in every chocolate dish we make today: sugar. All right, so how do you make chocolate without sugar? Here I have some Mexican chocolate, which actually already comes with cinnamon and sugar in it. This is great if you want to shave it up and put it in some hot chocolate. But today, if you get your baking chocolate, right, if you've ever taken a bite out of it, bittersweet baking chocolate, it's terrible. It's a rude awakening because there's no sugar in it whatsoever. So how could the Aztecs possibly use this? Well, they actually made a drink, so like a hot chocolate, and they would use water, grind up the cocoa beans, and then to make your cocoa powder, and then they added cornmeal. So cornmeal, or in the summer, you mash up your corn and make it into a pulp. So it would be a really thick, very thick kind of chocolatey, hot chocolate type of drink that we may not like the texture of it today. And so how do you kind of kick it up a notch? They'd add some chile, right? Make a spicy hot chocolate, add some vanilla, some cinnamon. So this winter when you make your hot chocolate, try adding just a pinch of cayenne and you'll kind of get that Aztec flavoring to it. Okay, so enough about the history of chocolate. Let's make a really good chocolate cake. Okay, so I'm starting with a classic Texas sheet cake recipe. And don't worry, I'll give you the recipe. You'll be able to make this any day of the week. Okay, so starting in this bowl, I have 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a teaspoon of baking soda. And so those are our classic dry ingredients. Grab off my stove here. Okay, so this is a little different. You actually are going to use your stove on this one. In your saucepan, you're going to heat up half a cup of Crisco, a stick margarine, 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and a cup of water. And just bring this up to a boil. You don't want to burn the chocolate, but you do want it to mix up and be nice and creamy. Okay, so add this all in, all this chocolatey goodness here. Okay, set that off to the side. Okay, we're going to mix this by hand. Let's test out my arm strength here. This is actually going to be a very, very thin cake batter. So you don't have to use the heavy KitchenAid mixer. You don't have to make sure and mix it, for 2 minutes or beat, 500 strokes as our old recipes would do. Okay, let me get this kind of stirred up here. Okay, it smells so good. You can really already smell the cinnamon, right, and the warm chocolate. The steam's kind of bringing that out. Okay, let's mix the rest of our wet ingredients, and we have half a cup of buttermilk, 2 eggs slightly beaten, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Okay, we're going to pour this in. This is one of those easy recipes where you can just pour it all into one big bowl and mix it up. You don't have to, add a little bit of the liquid to the dry, keep adding, just mix it all up. Now I usually do this with my KitchenAid, so it does kind of the work for me, but we're going to do it by hand here. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but it's mixing up, it's coming together. Make sure and get all these eggs worked in here. Okay. All right. Okay. There we go. All right. Got that. Okay. So I've got my greased and floured 13 by 9-inch baking pan. So just pour it in here. Now I actually don't like using those sprays. I feel like it tends to burn the edges. So I just use the butter and then the flour. Old-fashioned way. It always works, right? Okay. So again, you can see it's not a super thick. I got a couple little flour chunks there because I'm mixing it by hand. Okay. All right, so easy cake right here. You're going to pop this in the oven at 400 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. My oven's actually a little fast. Okay, so what do you do when someone gives you a recipe and they're like, oh, bake 20 to 30 minutes? Well, it can go from raw to burnt in 10 minutes, right? So what you want to do is look for a cake, it's going to start to pull away from the edges, right? And it's like, oh, it looks cooked. Well, go ahead and insert a toothpick in the middle. And when it comes out clean and dry, then you know your cake is done. Okay, so this is going to bake 20 to 25 minutes. Now, while your cake is baking, make your icing. Okay, so I already have some pre-made up here, chocolate icing. Okay, now here's where we can make some variations of this cake. So it'll be with your icing. Okay, your classic icing, you're going to get your saucepan out again, and on the stove, mix in a stick of butter or margarine, 4 tablespoons cocoa, 6 tablespoons milk, right? So melt that up, make sure it's hot, but don't burn the chocolate. And then you're going to pour that in your mixing bowl, right? And then add a whole box of powdered sugar, 16 ounces, and then a teaspoon of vanilla. And I usually have the KitchenAid mix it up so that you don't get lumps of powdered sugar in your icing. And then again, if your chocolate's nice and hot, you won't have any lumps in there. So you can see right here. Now the best part about this cake, you just pour the icing on it while it's hot. So as soon as it comes out, you can let it cool a minute or two. I just pour it on top, and then that way the icing, it kind of infuses into the first layer of cake. And it's so gooey and good. Okay, so classic Texas sheet cake, you're going to add half a cup of chopped pecans to your icing. Now, if you want to go Mexican style cake, omit the pecans and put a teaspoon of cinnamon in your icing. And this is actually how I prefer it. Even if I were going to add the pecans, I still put the cinnamon in the icing. Now, if you want to go Aztec, you could put a little cayenne pepper in the cake. I probably wouldn't put it in the icing, but maybe 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 if you're pretty bold, depending on how spicy you like your Mexican spicy cake. Okay, so I have pre-made a cake to taste, and of course you can, never have too much chocolate cake in the house. So let's try it out here. This is really good. So it's warm. You want to serve it warm, maybe with a scoop of ice cream. And the icing, it has infused into that top layer. The cinnamon really elevates the flavor of the chocolate. It gives this nice kind of extra depth of flavor. Sometimes people add espresso to chocolate to kind of bring out the flavor. And we always add vanilla, right? Why do you add vanilla to chocolate? It's to kind of help enhance that flavor. But try it with cinnamon. You won't regret it. And this cake is rich. It's creamy. It has Crisco. It has buttermilk in it. You cannot mess it up. Pour it all in the bowl. Stick it in your pan and bake it up. Okay, so remember, everything tastes better with food, right? Even your history. So make sure and subscribe so you can get some food for your belly and your brain.